Hello, everyone. My name is Andre Washington, and I work for Diet. And I'm going to do a presentation, as you can see, on art school applications. So let's begin. First, we're going to cover our presentation topics. So we're going to start with my personal introduction. Then we're going to move on to arts, academic, and career pathways. So we're going to talk a little bit about what are the different avenues into how you approach getting in to the type of art school that best fits your skill set and interest as an artist. Then we're going to talk about the three application routes into art school. We're going to talk about how to prepare a successful art application, as well as some personal statement insights that I think over the years of myself, having applied to different types of schools, whether they be law school or art school or undergrad, and having to mentor people who are doing similar things and kind of basically getting some of the best practices, I'm going to pass some of those along to you, right? So I'm really going to kind of give you some approaches to think about as to how to craft your personal statement to really try to stand out from the crowd. Okay, so let's begin with myself and a little bit of my career journey and personal life journey. So I graduated a while ago from undergraduate, as you can tell. I went to the University of Michigan. I majored in anthropology. I really enjoyed my time at the University of Michigan. And we're not really going to talk about Michigan at all, but I just in terms of my experience, I think that undergraduate is a space for you to be able to explore and find yourself and your interest, what inspires you, and what it is that you want to do throughout your life. And Michigan, in my opinion, is one of the few schools on the planet that has a significant enough name where it doesn't really matter what you choose to study or pursue while at Michigan, you're probably going to be in a pretty good position once you graduate, right? And there's only maybe I don't know 30 schools in the world where you can say that, and Michigan's for sure on that list. I got my law degree from the University of Oregon. I served in the military, and so the military kind of funded my uh, experience to go to law school. It was a targeted thing that I was asked to do at the time, and it was a great experience. I loved it. I really liked the University of Oregon. I liked law school. I don't know that I'm a lawyer or that I would be a good lawyer even, but I actually enjoyed the intellectual rigor that was law school. And I for sure would not have gone to law school if my plan was not to be in the military. And then what finds us here on this path is my interest in art. So, as an artist, I'm not a studio artist, I'm a performance artist. My background is predominantly in stage, um, comedy, theater, writing. Now I've moved into fiction in terms of crafting novels, but that's how I found myself being able to get accepted into Tisch was I took a performance artist spot. So we're going to talk about that, right? We're going to talk about what's the difference between performance art and studio art and kind of the different ways. We're not going to get into heavy film school discussion or acting discussion. We're going to like briefly touch on some of these things, but in terms of the most substantive part of what we're going to cover today. It's going to actually be the application part, right, and how to craft that application properly. But we will kind of touch on making sure that your interest, that the school has enough interest to be able to meet what it is that you're trying to study as an artist. Okay, and I kind of just touched on it a little bit, but basically, my goal is to work in entertainment, not necessarily to be like a director or really even like a screenwriter, even though it's written here. But I do want to work in content development. I think that's kind of more of what I'm moving to now, is trying to craft what shows and what type of programming, specifically subscription media like Hulu and Netflix, decides to put on the air. So I would like to be a part of that conversation moving forward in the future for the next 20 or 30 years as those kind of video on demand subscription services have begun to replace the normal network model and studio model of production and entertainment in the industry. Okay, so uh, a little more about me. Just briefly, we'll cover some of these things. For those of you who are interested to go into art school in New York, I lived in New York for a total of almost 12 years of my life, off and on for different experience. A period of my military service was in New York too. So I all artists at some point in time in their life all hover towards a large city, right? Large cities tend to inspire people. There are some rural artists who stay out in the countryside and are inspired by the countryside, and that's great. But for the most part, people tends to be one of the things that inspires artists. Or if it's not people, maybe it's the energy and space of being in the large city. So, whether it's Singapore or New York or Los Angeles or Chicago or Rome or Milan or I mean, there's so many to Paris, right? London, Lagos. There's so many different places all around the world, right, where artists hover to. Johannesburg, right, that artists like to go to in terms of just finding inspiration and connecting with other artists and a large part of art is building community, right, and so it's harder to build community in a smaller area, right? It's easier to build community in a more populous space. So I think that I found myself living in New York because I was slowly pursuing my career and what I wanted to do as an artist. Again, I already mentioned I served in the military. That's how I found myself in law school. I moved to China after my military service ended and I graduated from NYU. I moved to China for 3 years to teach dramatic arts at the high school and preschool level. Um, and for those of you who either went to at some point in time in your life or at a minimum are familiar with. I was a teacher at the Julia Gabriel Center, so it's a dramatic arts preschool for children. It's a Singaporean school. It's also in India and in China. I worked in the Shanghai schools. Okay, so now I'm here in America. I live in Berkeley. My wife goes to law school at UC Berkeley, and I'm working in the legal industry at the time. But again, slowly still pursuing my art dreams and hopes and aspirations. And we're going to talk more about that at the end. So I don't want to kind of give that part away now. So when we get to the career planning, we'll cover more of the how that history ties in, and I'll use myself as the example just so that it makes it more grounded and applicable for you to be able to understand. Okay, so first I'm just going to pop all these up because I want you to be able to kind of get the overview. So we're going to just really carefully for a couple of minutes walk through what I kind of think of as the different kind of pathways of how you can think about not necessarily being an artist, right? Because artist has no boundaries. You can do all of these things and be an artist. But in terms of having to choose art school, they are going to kind of bracket you into a few of these. So the majority of our discussion is going to focus on performance art track, design art track, and fine art track. I don't have the experience in music, so I do not want to sit here trying to tell you guys about music school admissions because I don't know how music school admissions work. If you happen to be a gifted artist and music is your medium, I suggest that we will talk about this a touch now, but just to kind of foreshadow that one of the things you think about is if you really need graduate school, or if you're, or specifically if you're thinking about graduate school as an artist. If you're an undergrad, then yeah, of course, because you're going to go to undergrad anyways. But I'm hesitant unless what you're trying to do is do production. I feel like as an artist, you need to just be out there, specifically as a musician, just making music, and that's the best way to grow and develop, and to network and build community. So for fine art, design, and performance art, those will be the ones we cover. And let's just kind of work from fine art over. So if you think about fine art, it's going to be the normal mediums that you're imagining, right? Painting and drawing and sculpture and printmaking. And when you think about those and you think about what type of art school I want to go to, you really want to be thinking about where you are at this point in time in your life as an artist. Do I feel like I need to grow conceptually? Right? Am I really talented? Is my skill set gifted? I can paint really well, but sometimes I struggle with how to come up with inspiration. Right? Sometimes I struggle with how to push the boundaries of my creativity. Right? So then you're going to want to try to find an art school that maybe is a little more holistic in their approach, maybe a little less structured in their approach. Specifically, if you're coming from a background where you had a highly structured training in art prior to admissions into college. So if you're whether it was your preparatory school or through private lessons, you've had a very structured art path. maybe challenge yourself, right? And try to think about an art path that isn't going to be too structured. And that might be the thing that actually helps you grow as an artist. Or if if you're comfortable and you just want to stick with the path that you know, then that's okay too. But I'm just trying to give you the idea that if your thought is hey, maybe I want a little less structure, that might be okay, right? That truly might be okay. Now, if you've never had structure as an artist and you're a great artist and everyone's telling you're great and you get into some amazing art school, right? Then okay, that's fine, right? Like, but at the same point, maybe what you want to think about is I might need an art school that has a little bit more structure. I might need an art school or a film school that has a little bit more rules and order to it. Okay. And then when you think about design, for me, I'm conceptualizing design still kind of blended in terms of two worlds, right? I'm thinking of it as fashion and kind of like your studio design and your set design. And I don't want to offend anyone, but it's not that I'm not including graphic design. I just feel like if you're interested in graphic design, this might not be the webinar for you, right? There's probably a really good space where you can get information about the best programs for graphic design. Um, so I'm primarily thinking about and even though I listed advertising again, that falls really in the land of like almost business school. Okay, so again, if that's something that you're interested in, okay, then possibly consider I want to go to a school that has a really good art school and a really good business school so I can blend these two skill sets together. That's amazing if you have that much foresight at this point in time, or if you've already kind of studied the advertising side on the undergraduate. So for the graduate school, you want to be more art focused, then that's amazing too. Okay, so just kind of off the bat, this talk is going to assume that most people are thinking about graduate school admissions, but if you are thinking about undergraduate admissions, I'm going to be able to cover it comprehensively enough where it helps you from that standpoint too. Okay, so in no way worry that if you're thinking about this from the undergraduate standpoint, that this discussion and webinar will not be helpful for you because it absolutely will. Okay, and then as far as design goes, again, I have fashion design, I have commercial, I have functional, and it's more about are you trying to design for industry or are you trying to design what's the market, right? Like who's the end user of the products that you're creating, right? Because in many ways you can still be an artist and you can be making large scale uh, it could be furniture in all honesty for like Target, right? So that's still art, right? In my opinion, right? That still falls under the skill set of what is art, right? You're still designing and creating, right? You're conceptualizing things that are weren't necessarily there before, or at the most you're stretching something that is currently existing and you're trying to refine or redesign the use for it in a way that adds a level of creativity to it that maybe someone else doesn't have, right? So for me, I have a very loose definition of art intentionally so as not to leave anything out. And then moving over to performance art, which is going to primarily be my area of understanding and expertise. Um, Performance art, film, cinema, theater, drama, actual performance art, which for me, I still kind of categorize under the area of theater. But it's okay, right? If you are a hardened believer that performance art is not theater, then that's fine. I'm not going to push you on it. And then acting, which is a unique discussion if we think about art school, because acting is, along with probably the painting, drawing, sculpture programs, are going to be the majority of what we call conservatory programs, where you're not doing too much textbook work, and a lot of what you're doing is workshop based study. So it's not that you're not writing and reading, it's just that there's not really your normal, typical syllabus guiding the development over the course of the semester and ultimately, your entire arc of your educational career. Okay. Again, I'm going to open up all the slides for this one just so you have the opportunity to kind of see the entire glimpse of what I'm trying to communicate to you. So, in terms of the routes into art school, again, music excluded, no offense. Um, they have the application based programs. So, application based programs are going to, for the most part, be all of the schools. Okay, so even if you're applying to a 100% conservatory only school, there's still going to be some sort of like typical application to it, right? Name, what's your address, where'd you go to, send your transcripts, those type of things. So when I separate application off, I'm talking about that the focus of what decides whether or not you get admitted is on this part. Okay, so if you're doing film production, if you're doing cinema critique, right, like a cinema studies program, or if you're doing art critique, like fashion critique or studio art critique, and that's what you're going to school for, is to learn the criticism for those other types of art. That's great, but at the same time, what's going to decide whether or not you get admitted is going to primarily be your grades, your writing sample, your recommendation letters. There's not necessarily going to be a portfolio um, of your work that comes along with it. Okay, so that's why we have scholarship, right? So that would be like, your writing samples, your personal statements, things you've published. That would be great, right? Articles, journals, even if you have a blog that's really popular, right? Those things can really be effective to communicating your passion to wanting to write and specifically critique. And it shows your kind of talent level, right? If you have a blog going and people are following it, then you must be pretty good because obviously part of criticism is people must care what your opinion is. Okay, and then we have our auditions. Okay, so auditions are going to be the conservatory programs. So even though I said music excluded, for the most part, all the music programs are going to fall under auditions too. Just if you're wondering. So if you're going to be in an acting program or you want to major in very often, even though directing isn't going to have an audition, directing is going to have a submission portfolio. Okay, so that's going to be your audition where you're submitting your works and pieces. Screenwriting, same thing. There's not an audition where you're going to show up in person, right? But you're going to submit a large volume of your writing, and that's what's going to substantiate that you are qualified to be in this program. Specifically, if you're trying to do it on the graduate level and get an MFA, right? You're going to have to be able to show, for a lot of these schools, substantial skill, and it doesn't have to be in the program. So maybe you majored in directing as an undergraduate, but you want to get your MFA in screenwriting, right? You don't have to maybe necessarily show a huge swath of scripts that you've written, but you need to be able to show in the scripts that you do have that you are really, really talented. Or you need a history, right? I wrote this script that was optioned to this studio, and even though it wasn't made, it was still purchased by whatever, and it had a 2-year holding contract. Or I wrote this project that was made as an independent film or a student film, and it won this award. And this award is relatively prestigious in my town and region, and this is how many people win it every year, and you can kind of give the metrics for that. So those are the things that they're looking for in terms of the different assessments for each one of these groups, right? So application, again, your paper, right? What does it say on your hard written targets? Like what are your grades? What is your SAT score or GRE score or your TOEFL score, right? For the international students, right? What's your TOEFL score? Right? What are your numbers? What are your metrics, right? Think about it that way, right? For a paper-based application. For the auditions, right? It's not so much what are your metrics. Yes, that's a factor, right? But the main piece to your admissions, at least 50% of it is how do you perform on performance days? How do you do in interviews, right? How are you going to do when you actually have to step up on the stage or pull out your violin or submit your paintings or submit your film work, right? I'm just going to talk about auditions and portfolio together because I see them as the same, right? One is live, right, because of the type of skill that you're doing, and the other is just it's your work, right? It's the things that it's your work product. Think of it that way, right? What are your songs? What are your movies? What are your stories? And are they compelling? And this is the single most important thing right now in 2018. Do they fit the environment of what we're trying to do? So, do they need to be politically and culturally aligned? No, right? But do they fit the environment of what we're trying to do? And by that I mean, if the school makes it very clear that what they're interested in is experimental film and what you're interested in is traditional film, then there's probably not going to be a fit there, right? But if the school says, listen, we're interested in having an eclectic mix of all different types of people that study all different types of film, then yeah, that might be a program that is open for you, right? Or if it's we're predominantly interested in people that want to do traditional film approaches, right? They want to make studio features or television work product. Like these are the people that we're trying to admit into this program. And if that's your interest, then that's probably the program for you, right? So that's just to kind of foreshadow where we're going to next. That's kind of the first assessment level of what you're looking at, kind of when you're looking at a school is specifically for the film people, right? For the people interested in film, is the type of things I like to do, the types of things they like to do, or are they at least open minded about me doing these types of things? Because you don't want to meet that friction, right? Worst case scenario is you get admitted and they don't let you do what you want to do, and you're going to be frustrated the entire time. Okay, so we hinted at this a little bit for the application track: TOEFL, SAT, GRE, right? And um, you could there's I mean you can substitute the TOEFL out, right? There's some IELTS, right? There's some other exams that you can take in 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 place of the TOEFL. In terms of the SAT and the GRE and the TOEFL or whichever other exams you're thinking about, the one piece I would say to keep in mind is I know the school may communicate that they have a huge range of scores that they accepted, but for the most part, you need to have a really high score, right? For any school that's going to be specifically in the United States in the top 25, you need to be placing in the top quartile at least, right? In the top 15 to 20% at the worst, right? 25% at the very worst. But that's where you should be. And the GRE, there's a little room because sometimes the GRE, depending on the school, that's not as important. It's just something that they have to have. But if for the undergraduates, the SAT, and for all the international students to TOEFL, you need to have a really high score. Unless your application is immaculate, you need to have really high test scores. And it's extremely competitive for international students in art school because they know there's going to be a language barrier, and these are very language heavy classes. So, my stress point is to take the test seriously. I know you want to be an artist, but you need to be able to show that you also have the academics to support your art. Grades and GPA are important. However, if you want to be an actor and your grades are just decent, but you can really act, you're probably still going to get into the school, okay? Bad grades hurts your chances, but I mean, if you're the next Leonardo DiCaprio and you have a 3.0 GPA, you're probably still going to get into USC's program or NYU's program. I mean, you probably are. I don't want to say for sure, but you probably are. If you're that good of an actor, okay? If you are not sure if you're the next Leonardo DiCaprio and people have not told you that, then you probably want to be hovering above 3.5 on the GPA for the acting people and for the directing people. Um, when you're thinking about any scholarship, so cinema studies, any sort of critique writing program, screenwriting even too, your GPA wants to be pushing the 3.7, right? That A minus space. But for all the portfolio based people, you want to be over 3.5, right? That's pretty much the goal. If you're under that, then that's think of for every percentage point I am. So if you're at 3.4, 3.3, 3.2, whatever, I'm under a 3.5, that's that much better that the rest of my portfolio needs to be. Not personal statement, accomplishments, and recommendation letter, but my portfolio, right? If you're a portfolio track person, that's how much better your portfolio needs to be. If you're a scholarship track person, critique, writing, then you're really want to consider applying to the right schools that meet your metrics so you don't waste your money because some of these application fees can be as much as $100 US. Personal statement. We're going to get into personal statement more later. I just put personal statement here because that's part of the application that you're going to have to include. And accomplishments. So let's stop here for a second. So when we talk about accomplishments, um, I'm going to separate it into two groups. Group number one is for people who are doing film. Okay. And so if you're going to do anything that's like film based, acting based, screenwriting based, any festivities where you've like won an award at like a film festival or you were given some grant because of a short that you submitted for grant money to make a larger project, all that stuff is huge, right? Because that all goes to show that you understand how hard it is to generate funding for the projects. Okay, so like for the art, film, acting people, right? Accomplishments is really important, really, really important for your application. Now, for the art people, I want to say I don't think they're as important. Accomplishments are always great to have, right? But if you're a really good painter, but maybe you haven't actually felt that comfortable showing your work, I think that's okay. I don't really think it's going to hurt your application, right? If you've won some really impressive awards for your artwork, then of course that's going to help your admissions. But for people that are not going the film path and the screenwriting path or the acting path, I think it's okay because you're working with much more personal mediums, right? You're not working in a social space, right? Your mediums are so much more personal to you. Set design might also be another category that I would throw into maybe if you have some accomplishments that helps you. But for the other people, like maybe you just have a really good eye for art, right? And you've always nurtured and grown that talent on your own or because you've had a mentor or a trainer. And I don't think it's as much of an issue. Okay, so I just wanted to stop right there for a second so that people don't feel discouraged when they see accomplishments. And then recommendation letters are great. Um, I try to encourage people to, if they let you have three, that's awesome. I know they've kind of shrunken it down to two for a lot of programs, but if you can get to three recommendation letters, that's incredible. And the reason why I say that is because you want to be able to show a cross section of who you are, right? You want to be able to basically say, this is my professional self, right? This is my artistic self. This is my academic self, right? And your artistic self is the personal self too, okay? So that's the same one. So any personal struggles or things that you've overcome, that falls under your artistic self as well. Okay, but your personal and academic self. So, who's going to be the person that says this person can handle the academic rigor or the artistic rigor, right? This is the person who says that this person is professional, this person is responsible. If admitted, this person is going to be able to live up to the standard that your school holds for what is expected from not just a artistic standpoint, but from a code of conduct standpoint, right? From a can you stick to the commitment of the 2 years or 3 years or 4 years that it's going to take to graduate? Okay, are you going to pay the tuition, right? So those are some of the things that come in the professionalism standpoint, right? It's a think of it as every time you apply, you're kind of asking to be in an educational relationship, right? And so this person wants to know, well, do I want to be in an educational relationship with you? I need to know some of the people. Do you have any references, right? So that's kind of what your recommendation letter stands for, right? And then your artistic self is obviously the most important recommendation letter. And it doesn't need to be from somebody famous, but it does need to be to someone that can speak to your artistic arc. And by that I mean they can speak to either maybe they don't know, when you started doing art and followed you ever since your first day of doing art. That's not necessarily essential. When I say artistic art, I mean they've been able to see you grow as an artist, right? So they've shown that you have growth. You're not just a plateaued artist, right? Some artists that paints one style really great or paints one way really great, but you're not even willing to open or expand your mind because that's the whole point of why you want to go to graduate school. If you just want to stay doing the same type of thing, you don't necessarily need to go to graduate school. The whole point of going to graduate school or to go to college is to expand and grow, right? That's the whole point of this. Okay, now comes the fun part. Okay, so when you think about preparing a successful art application, one of the things that you should always try to keep in mind is that, for me at least, I always consider the fact that you're telling a story and you want to be able to communicate that story as clearly and not necessarily efficiently, but as clearly and precisely as possible, right? You want them to not see gaps in your story, right? Why does this person's resume have a year of space where there's no information, right? Why are the grades really good for 3 years and then one semester they fall off, right? Like no red flags. Okay, that's maybe the better way to kind of explain. That's the main goal of the application. The base level of the application is no red flags. Okay, and then the compelling part of the application is how do I wow, right? What's my pop? What's the thing I have that's going to make me stand out, right? That's not negative, right? That I don't want to stand out because I forgot to leave something in the application. I don't want to stand out because my application is so poorly written and I didn't proofread it. I want to stand out because my application does all the things it needs to do, and there's some very impactful, compelling part to my application that makes the first person that reads it go, man, so and so must have to take a look at this, right? This person needs to see this person, right? So you gotta look at Andre's application. Look what he's gone through. Look what he's done, right? Look what type of art this person is doing, right? That's the second thing you want, right? You want that pop because that's what you're gonna have as an artist, right? What's the thing that people want to invest in your skill set and take notice of you? Okay, so real quick, tailor the overall application for the school's art culture. We talked about that before. Remain true to who you are, right? Don't make anything up, right? Be honest about what it is that you want to do and why you want to accomplish it. But at the same time, right, massage what you want to do if you really want to go to a school into their culture. Okay. I wrote pick a mix of your most accomplished portfolio pieces, but if you feel that there's a through line, there's one set piece that really highlights you best as an artist, then go with that. But otherwise, I'd say pick a cross section of your pieces so they can see how you've grown or they can see all of your different styles. I say don't be afraid to be vulnerable and share personal information because, again, that's how you pop, right? That's how you stand out. Okay? Proofread, proofread, proofread. If it has grammar or spelling mistakes, it makes it seem like you didn't care. Personal statement, insights. I'm just going to click them on it all up at once. Be honest. Again, we just talked about that before. Don't make anything up. But at the same time, it's okay to craft the narrative in a way that makes it seem like you overcame maybe a little bit more than not necessarily that you did, but you write it in such a compelling way. It makes the person feel like this task was greater than it may have actually been. But the reason why it feels that way is because of your insight. It's what you learned from the thing that you did, right? That makes this person feel like, that convinces this person that this thing was bigger than it actually was, right? So focus on how you grew from the experience instead of the experience. Um, and we talked about this. This is again just transitions perfectly, right? Try to evidence how you overcome some sort of obstacle, right? What is the thing that you've done? It doesn't have to be, a obstacle in the sense that something negative happened in your life, right? It can be that it's my belief in should I invest my time and energy in art, right? When I began doing art, and then as I grew as an artist, this is what I started to find out about myself and the world around me. Okay, like that can be the obstacle that you overcame. And then get out into your community and participate in the art community. That's the best way to have information for your personal statement because you can get art insights from other artists in terms of what they did for their application. But even if that doesn't happen, I actually am saying get physically out into your community and do some service, right? Do art with children that are young, right? Because that can start to give you some stories of ways that this might be one of the things I want to do as an art. I want to be an art teacher because I started volunteering and working with arts doing art with kids, with children, and that's a great, compelling personal statement. Okay, so for me, the reason why I say get out into the community, I mean get out into the art community, but also just physically get out into your community and participate and use your art as your connection point to participate, and that can be what you write about. Volunteer, just talked about it, so I'm not going to keep going. But if you want to come to America and you want to go to a top 25 university, they're pretty much going to expect that you have some volunteer work. Okay, briefly, when you think about career planning in art, and this is where I'll kind of bring myself in, you want to make sure that you're charting a path backwards. Okay, so like, what is the task that I want to do? And then what are the steps to that task, right? So I want to be a producer at a independent film house in China. Okay, so I don't want to work for a major studio. I want to go out and source money on my own and make my own independent film projects, or I want to make documentary movies, right? So if that's what you want to do, then backwards plan. So the best thing to do is find someone who you respect that's already doing something similar, right? And kind of backwards plan their career. Either just look them up online and figure out how they got to that endpoint, or if you're lucky enough to know that person, ask them, hey, can we have a sit down and a chat? And then just pick their brain. So from the time you were 20 until now, what were the steps you took to get to that goal? Or just kind of tell me what were the different jobs you took and kind of maybe walk me through why, right? Backwards planned it. I think LinkedIn's a great place because you can just see someone's whole career, right? So you can start, from what they're doing now and you can work back. And that's how you think about it. Where do I need to intern first to get that job? Okay, that's a very, very, very important piece is to backwards plan when you career plan. How am I actually going to accomplish? It's one thing to say, I want to be a screenwriter in Hollywood. Okay, that's great. But like, how are you actually going to do it? Okay, well, first, I'm going to basically become a production assistant on set for 5 years, right? And I'm just going to make no money out of college for 5 years. I'm going to PA, carrying microphones and doing whatever, meeting all the people I can. And then at night, I'm going to join every writer's guild I can, and I'm going to share as much work as I can. I'm going to go to all the writers' workshops, and I'm just going to put my work out there, and I'm just going to make all the connections I can, right? And then over the course of that 5 years, I'm going to work out from PA to assistant producer to associate producer, and then I'm going to slowly climb. And as I climb and move into content creation, that's a plan, right? That's a plan. Don't just like I'm going to move to LA and figure it out, right? That's also a plan, but that was my plan. Sometimes that's not the best plan, right? You want to have some structure to what it is that you do. Okay, I had to move out to Hollywood, but I moved to New York, right? It's the same thing. You want to have some structure to the plan, right? What's the goal when I go to this space so that you know whether or not each day, week, month, year, you're moving towards that goal, okay? And then the next one is get a job and stick to it. I kind of hinted at this before, but what's changing now is for a while people had to move around a lot to find success. Right? Back in the day, you stayed at the same place, and that's how you find success. And that's actually slowly becoming the theme again, right? If you can stay at HBO for 7 years, you will slowly grow to the part where you start to have a say. And if you don't, and you don't see upward mobility, then that's when you make a move. That's when you choose move over. But specifically in entertainment and in art, by sticking to it, right, and being very stubborn, and just by not quitting, you eventually find your way into the space you want to be, right? I know it seems like you have to have some amazing luck, right? But 90% of the times, the people you see on television acting and the artists you see that made it that are famous, part of the reason why they made it is because they stuck at it, right? They had the commitment to continue to do this thing in the face of no reward, no success, depression, uh, you know, debt, right? No money, no food at times, sleeping on people's couches. You don't see that, right? You only ever see them on TMZ having pictures taken of them, right? But nobody saw the climb to that point for a lot of artists and for actors specifically. Okay, so there's a lot of failures that come along the way. And so if you aren't going to stick to it, then art can be a very, very tough career choice. Okay. And then we're all done. I will say in summarization really quickly, the thing I'd like to stress to everyone is when applying to art school should be a choice because you're passionate about art, right? No one goes to art school to get rich. I'd like to stress that. You go to art school because you live, breathe, and eat art, right? And it's the thing you have to do, otherwise, you can't function. And if you're not one of those people, I don't know that you want to invest the time and the finances to go to art school, right? I think that you can still be an artist without having to pay for the experience. All right? It was absolutely wonderful getting a chance to present. Good luck with your applications. Bye bye.